Chapter 2. We're going to tackle Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 this week. Kind of an interesting picture if you've ever seen, I can't remember the name of the movie, but this is McLovin, and of course he's throwing gang signs. He's about the least gangsta type individual you want to see. But this chapter we're going to talk about the ways of understanding and perceiving yourself and others. Now, one of the interesting things is the thing about McLovin, he may see himself as one thing, but we may see him as something totally different. So as a counselor, one of the things that we have to do is see the client from their own perspective. And that's one of the reasons why I have McLovin up here. I can't remember what his real name was, but his his gangsta name was McLovin. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, there we go, McLovin. Practitioners must realize that each person constructs reality in their own unique way, and this, of course, is called constructivism. Constructivism focuses on how individuals describe their experiences in terms of personal constructs. A personal construct is an explanation of an event or series of events that becomes the lens through which the individual sees the world. These constructs are developed as individuals interpret and give meaning to their experiences. Constructs are not consciously developed. They just come from what we experience. This is an example. These two ladies are riding on a camel. This is probably in the Middle East someplace, potentially Egypt. They're headed for the pyramids. That experience, the experiences of riding a dromedary, will potentially change their feeling of who they are, their idea of who they are. Social constructivists focus on how relationships, language, and context influence an individual's or a group's interpretation of self, others, and of course the world. And I have a picture of a group of French soldiers during World War I trying to move an artillery piece. Personality is the individual's distinctive qualities, their traits, their characteristics, and their behavior patterns. Personality is a socially constructed idea. Without society, then potentially we wouldn't be the same. Some of our strongest personality constructs are developed in childhood. These constructs tend to be harder to change because they're based on immature feelings and possibly illogical thoughts and are established by the undeveloped mind as truths. And this is one of the things that you have to understand when we're dealing with individuals, especially individuals who have gone through childhood trauma. When they went through that trauma, they didn't really understand what was happening to them, and they couldn't view it from an adult perspective. And because of that, they developed a concept of truth that was skewed. And because of this idea, and of course this idea doesn't mature with age. It can't mature with age unless they deal with that trauma. So what happened to them in their past potentially can plague them for the rest of their lives. And this is one of the reasons that psychologists and social workers, this is one of the reasons why counselors need to deal with the problems that an individual had in their childhood, because that may be skewing their ideas of how they perceive themselves, how they have constructed themselves. And of course, this is one of the things that Freud did. This is what Rogers did in his therapy. This is what everyone has to do. We have to find out what this problem was. We have to look at it from. We have to find out what it is and get the client to look at this situation from a more adult perspective, so that they can get over their potential problem. Childhood carryover. The mother says, my child is intelligent, handsome, and funny. And the child, of course, thinks true. This is wonderful. The mother has told the child all of these really positive things. But not all mothers tell their children the same thing. The father may say he is too awkward to play sports, and the son will, of course, say this is true. I am bad at sports, and they may never try to compete again. The mother, no one will love you unless you are thin and beautiful. And the daughter, that's true. I must lose weight and wear lots of makeup to cover my many flaws. Um, Parents, people not like us can't be trusted. And the children think, true, people who are different are dangerous. The parents, you are worthless and you will never amount to anything. The child will think, true, why even try? And of course, these are the things that can happen to people. This of course would be the ideal thing, calling the child intelligent, handsome, and funny, only saying positive things to the child. But some parents are not that way. Culture strongly influences words used to describe someone's personality. Minority cultures will sometimes accept the dominant culture's view of themselves as true and use that definition to evaluate themselves. And of course, these are indigenous peoples. My Indian name is Drinks Like a Fish. My Indian name is Crawling Drunk. And of course, when that is thrown at you over and over and over again, and your mind is not mature yet, you can't really argue with it. You find it difficult to argue with. The constructivist perspective helps practitioners remember that their view of the world may be different from their client's view. The practitioner needs to remember to work within the client's view of reality. And there's a reason why I have a picture of the people that were in Jersey Shore. Theoretically, that was a reality show, and if you saw it that way, if you interpreted it as reality, then they have constructed they've constructed a world that is very much different from what reality actually shows most people. I don't know. One of these is JWoww. I think that's JWoww. That's Snooky, and that's the what did he call himself? The Situation or something. The rest of them I don't know. I never actually saw the show. When an individual, family, or group becomes aware of the construct that is unsatisfying or limiting, the individual can develop another meaning for events or experiences and begin to realize change is possible. And of course, that's what we were talking about. That's what Freud did. That's what Rogers did. That's what Ellis and Beck, all of the Jung, all of the theorists that came up with ways of dealing with clients. That was their idea. They needed to point something out to the client that was getting in their way, and they needed to change it. But the idea is better if it comes from the client. And of course, the reality is, if we can get the client to admit their problems, then potentially what we can do is get them to deal with it. If they don't admit that they have a problem, they're not going to there's nothing you can say that's going to change anything. The client has to agree with you. Of course, sometimes a practitioner will have to work with pair bond structures that have very different individual constructs. A husband may believe that a wife should stay home and raise the children, while his wife might think that she should be able to go out and work. Now, there's a reason why I put this in here, because when I first started in psychology back in the 1970s, this was the major crisis that was taking place all over the United States. Should a woman work, or should she be allowed to go outside the home should she stay home and take care of the children? This is not much of a debate anymore, but there is still some degree of a debate whether women should stay home or whether they should go out and work. But once upon a time, this was it. This was like 70% of what you're dealing with had to do with the husband wanting the wife to stay home, and the wife wanting to go out and work, or vice versa. Sometimes the wife wanted to stay home, and the husband thought that she needed to go out and make help the income of the family. Systems theory takes into account the entire system with which an individual interacts. A system is seen as a complex entity within which interactions are as important as the individuals. Now, this was the 70s. Now, one of the things you have to remember about the 1970s, this is what I was talking about before. One of the things that you need to remember about the 1970s is that divorce wasn't really legal in most states in the United States until the end of the 1960s. So single parenthood was rare, was very rare at that point. The only way that somebody could be a single parent was if the one of the individuals died, um, the mother or the father died. So it was a totally different environment back in the 1960s and 1970s when this debate was taking place. Now, of course, there are so many single parents, and many of them, most of them, about 80% of them are female. Because of that, of course, women have to work. There are very few single income families there are very few single income families. If the father's making enough money, that's kind of a rarity that he can actually make enough money to provide for an entire family. And of course, families are smaller now than they were before. In the 50s and 60s, right after World War II, was the baby boom era. People were having relatively large families, three, four, five, 6 children. My family, of course, was six. We had 6 children in my family. My wife's family had three. It was um, that was commonplace. So you very rarely saw a single child family, an only child family. It wasn't common at all. And now, of course, it's far more common. So things have changed over time, and of course, that has changed the way that you have to see things and the way that counseling takes place. Once upon a time, this was a huge issue, like I said, and now it's not nearly the same issue. There aren't that many people that are debating whether the woman should work or not. A system is seen as a complex entity within which interactions are as important as the individuals. And we're talking about family, the systems theory. Rules are established by the family to teach what is expected or permitted by individual family members. The rules help regulate and stabilize how families function as a unit. Changing one part of the family system will result in changes to other parts. If something in the family dynamic changes, like a wife getting a job to help with family finances, the homework distribution will have to change to even out the labor. You can't expect a woman who works 8 hours a day to do the same things that she was doing when she wasn't working. Now other people need to pitch in and help. Family systems may be open or closed in various degrees. In a closed family system, the family exists in relative isolation, with communication taking place primarily between members. Change is avoided. Members hold on to established traditions and values. That's a closed family system. I'm not sure why I have that picture. Characteristics of an open family system: willingness to assimilate new information and to engage in ongoing interactions with their environment. The family has no single correct way of doing things. As the family matures, changes are tolerated, supported, and celebrated. In the family systems perspective, practitioners gain an understanding of how interactions within the family system affects clients. Family systems assist clients in identifying reciprocal relationships between their behavior and influences of the systems within which they interact. Clients realize both how someone else's behavior is influencing them and how their behavior is influencing others. The ecological perspective views people and their environment as continuously evolving. Evolving just means change. It tends to mean relatively slow change. If it's rapid change, it's revolution. It's It's revolution. It's more revolutionary. The ecological perspective is less concerned with cause and effect and more concerned with transactions that occur between people and their environments. The ecological perspective was derived from the concepts of biological ecology. This structure enables practitioners and clients to think about the reciprocal relationship between people and the environment. Ecological perspective has three important components. Person-environment fit. Person-environment fit refers to how well a person's needs, goals, and rights mesh with the social and physical environment. Adaptations are the processes people use to sustain or increase the level of fit between themselves and the environment. And life stressors are issues that exceed the resources of an individual to deal with them. So let me give you an example. I live in the middle of a cornfield. Um, well, sometimes it's a soybean field, but I live in the middle of a field. Now, I know lots of people that couldn't stand to live where I'm living because they're more urban. They need people around them all the time, but I don't. So my fit between myself and the environment is really quite good. There's not much social interaction. Most of the social interaction I have is with my grandson's soccer team, and that's about it. Um, I interact with you guys, but I interact with you guys online. So that's my social and physical environment. I do seem to fit. I would adapt if I had to. I would move back down to Saley if I had to. Well, not now, but I would have before. I was living in Saley before COVID hit. And of course, COVID was one of the life stressors. It was quite of a life stressor for me to be moving back and forth. It's a 2-day trip between here and there. And of course, I had pets, and that was quite a bit of a stressor. So it's much easier for me to be here in Iowa and teach where I'm teaching. In ecological perspective, behaviors are not seen as dysfunctional or maladaptive. Instead, behavior is viewed as adaptations to improve the fit between the individual and the environment. In other words, anything that you do, anything that happens, and if that includes using drugs or drinking to excess, that is your means of adaptation. I'm not saying that it's right. What I'm actually saying is that this is your coping technique, and this is working for you, and we have to figure out a healthier means of adaptation. What have they done? I didn't realize that. Those aren't real hats. Those are, interesting. The strengths perspective views all people as having strengths. It focuses on assets clients have developed throughout their lives. A strength is defined as any psychological process that enables a person to think and act in order to benefit himself or herself and society. Strengths are often developed when people struggle with difficulties, traumas, oppression, disappointments, and adversity. Everyone has the capacity to develop new resources, to make positive changes, and to use his or her competencies to solve problems. Strengths perspective invites clients to discover, think about, and figure out how to use their strengths. This is different from traditional counseling because they tend to identify deficits, weaknesses, and problems. And of course, the strengths perspective focuses on what they have been able to do in the past. The old way of counseling, the traditional way of counseling, is to point out their deficits, their weaknesses, and their problems. When working with individuals, families, groups, or organizations, the practitioner looks for their strengths, identifies their resources, and invites them to focus on possibilities for the future. If you've ever seen A Princess Bride, it's really kind of interesting because they they bring the Dreadpire Roberts back to life, Wesley. They bring him back to life, and they want to attack the castle. They want to stop the wedding, and he asks them what their what benefits they have, what positive things they have. That's really what we're doing. We're trying to find positive things about the strengths, the positive things about select individuals who are our clients. Resilience is the ability to survive and thrive in the face of overwhelming life challenges. Resilience is a dynamic process that is the outcome of positive adaptation in the face of adversity, stress, or risk. Resilience is not a fixed personality trait or an inborn characteristic. No one is either vulnerable or resilient all the time. Resilience is learned behaviors and patterns of adaptation. Resilience depends on the availability of protective factors. Risk factors are any influencing factors that can bring or predict negative outcomes on the functioning and overall development of the individual. They can include biological influences, individual influences, family influences, community influences. Protective factors are any factors that can exert either direct or indirect influences to buffer the negative effects of risk factors. Protective factors include strengths, capabilities, talents, coping skills, resources, and assets. Resilience represents both a process and the outcome of competent functioning. Resilience as an outcome includes the interplay of risk and protective factors. Resilience as an outcome represents the resultant positive functioning and competence developed when facing adversity. I need to tell you that I did research with resilience when I was dealing with another another reservation. I was looking for the resilience factor for these individuals. And what I discovered was the thing that promoted resilience the most was culture, as curious as that is. So you need to maintain your culture. It's very important to maintain your culture. Practitioners using the resilience perspective start with an assessment of the relevant factors and then focus on helping clients build on the resilience they have developed. Practitioners focus on helping clients develop a positive outlook on life and self-confidence, maintain, promote, and enhance protective factors, recall successful events in their lives, identify resources, view a mistake as a window of learning, and focus on the present and the future. Empowerment perspective describes the process by which individuals, groups, or communities take control of their circumstances to achieve their goals. Empowerment has an internal as well as an external component. The internal component of empowerment is also called psychological empowerment, control over motivations, your thoughts, and your personality. Internal empowerment involves the belief that the individual will make competent decisions, solve their problems, achieve their goals, and have a significant impact on the environment. The external component of empowerment includes the tangible knowledge, competencies, skills, information, opportunities, and resources that allow the person to take action and actively advocate change. Empowerment, like resilience, is a process as well as an outcome. New competencies learned from experience leads to new feelings of empowerment. Research shows that the more involved an individual, the stronger the feeling of empowerment. The empowerment perspective allows clients to develop a sense of power and competency as they experience using their skills and knowledge in new and challenging ways. The empowerment perspective helps people discover their strengths, identify their goals, and develop a plan to reach their goals, allowing clients to accept responsibility for change and experience a greater sense of empowerment. The dual perspective views an individual as interacting and adapting to the two surrounding systems or environments. The nurturing environment is composed of family, friends, and close associates at school or work. The sustaining environment consists of the people encountered in the wider community and broader society. While most European Americans experience nurturing and sustaining environments as fitting together, other ethnic and racial groups experience a poor fit between them. Individuals in the non-dominant group constantly evaluate disappointments in life to determine whether they are based on one's qualifications or on racism from the dominant culture. Minority members must develop a dual perspective, equating disappointments with the hostility of the broader society. Minority members must constantly shift between the home culture and the dominant culture to choose acceptable behavior in each situation. The dual perspective allows the practitioner to attempt to understand the structural barriers that those in other groups experience. This perspective makes the practitioner aware of the day-to-day challenges minority clients face. And that is the end of chapter 2. Now we're going to tackle chapter 3, values, ethics, and legal obligations. And we're ballroom dancing. Values are preferred conceptions of people, outcomes for people, ways of dealing with people. Those are values. Personal values influence your view of the world, your personal and professional philosophies and choices, your view of how people change. Professional values often include principles of respect, self-determination, social justice, professional integrity. Areas where personal values may conflict with professional values include religion, health, marriage and family, education, role of government, birth and death, and honesty. Ethical codes provide a brief explanation of what can be expected in the interactions between professionals and clients, as well as between professionals and other professionals. Ethical codes contain statements about what the professionals must and must not do. These are some of the helping professional organizations that are out there. American Association of Marriage and Family, and there's their website, American Counseling Association, and of course the website American Psychiatric Nurses Association, the American Psychological Association. I'm a member of APA, by the way. Association of Addiction Professions, International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors, National Association of Social Workers, National Organization of Human Services. Those are some of them, and those are their websites. So if you are thinking, you're thinking that you want to be a counselor or you want to be a social worker, you can find their code of ethics on their website. Or you want to be an addiction counselor, or you want to be a marriage and family counselor, there are their websites. Professional competence includes practicing within the scope of competence based on education, training, professional credentials, and professional experience. One of the most important aspects of professional competence, requiring professional self-awareness, is cultural competence. Cultural competence is defined as the application of cultural knowledge about individuals and groups of people to the standards, policies, attitudes, and practices of the helping process to result in better outcomes. And of course, these are the Navajo Code Talkers, and this is a Marine General. Yeah, he's a Marine General. Confidentiality is vital for information shared. What happened? As far as the code talkers are concerned, Trump had some kind of he gave them medals, I think. This is back in 2017, 2018. Really kind of an embarrassing situation, not for the code talkers, of course, but Trump tried to make it a political thing, and he started talking about Pocahontas, he was attacking Elizabeth Warren, who he nicknamed Pocahontas because she claimed indigenous ancestry. It's really kind of sad. Sad for him. I mean, the code talkers, of course, are these wonderful individuals that helped win World War II, but he just didn't quite get it. And that was Donald Trump. Yeah, I guess he's running for president again. I should leave him alone, but he's just not quite. He thinks more of himself than he does about the people around him, and that's narcissism. Confidentiality is vital for information shared by the client with the therapist in the course of treatment. This information is not to be shared with others. Without confidentiality, clients are less likely to disclose sensitive information with the practitioner. Why maintain confidentiality? The potential for clients to experience stigma, moral obligation for helping professionals to follow the ethical standards for a professional, a model of acting with discretion and keeping one's word, legal requirements. This is why you maintain confidentiality. With the expansion of technology into all aspects of our lives, communication has become more and more difficult to regulate. Cell phones, fax machines, answering machines, computers, internet sites, all of these are available, are out there for people to see. Limit sending confidential material on insecure lines. Boundaries are defined as borders that separate some types of entities, for example, parents, children, systems, clients, service providers, and healthcare workers. These are boundaries. In all helping relationships, maintaining appropriate boundaries is an essential part of developing a trusting relationship with a client. Relationship boundaries must be maintained with delicacy. Sexual relationships with clients are forbidden by all professional codes and represent the most common ethical complaints against helping professionals. In one study, 7 to 8% of practitioners reported engaging in sexual intimacy with a client. That's a lot if you think about it. Sexual relationships can have a seriously negative effect on the client. It can cause cognitive dysfunction, identity and boundary disturbances, sexual confusion, rage and feelings of guilt, depression and emptiness, self-destructive feelings, increased risk of suicide. Who was I just reading about? I was just reading about Russell Brand. Russell Brand is an English comedian. And part of his problem, he's had drug problems in the past, and one of the reasons that he says that he has had these problems is because when he was 12 years old, he was molested by a tutor, by one of the people that was supposed to be helping him, a teacher that was supposed to be helping him. And of course, this caused just all kinds of interesting problems. It caused guilt on his part, and he dissipated these feelings of guilt by taking drugs, some fairly heavy drugs. You may remember Russell Brand as Katy Perry's first husband. She's now married to Orlando Bloom. Not sure why I know that, but yeah, okay. Touch, accepting gifts, and self-disclosure by professionals are behaviors that have potential to be boundary violations, depending on the circumstances. More damage can be done by overstepping boundaries than the help previously given, and this is one of the things that you need to be really careful of. You need to make sure that you don't destroy all the good that you've done by overstepping a boundary. There's a difference between city ethics and rural, small town, reservation boundary ethics. It is easy for city practitioners to gravitate in different circles than their clients. In smaller communities, it can be nearly impossible. And this is one of the things that I think that you need to remember. I was living in a county in Montana. The reservation was part of that county. There was one counseling social worker. She had a master's in social work. She's the only counselor in the area for hundreds of miles. She was the only one. So she had a really difficult time. I mean, she was a really good counselor. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that when she went, she was from the East Coast and she was a fairly heavy drinker. So when she went to the bar, she saw all of her clients, and this got to be a problem. Sometimes she stayed away, and she realized that by drinking alone, it was making her drink more, and she was becoming an alcoholic. So she resolved this by going back to the bar, and it actually tempered her drinking. And she resolved this by saying, there's not a whole lot I can do. There's only 7,000 people in this whole county. The probability that I can find a social network that are not my clients is impossible. It's nearly impossible. I mean, there are only 3 bars in the town, or in the county, in her area. So, I mean, was she supposed to do? And eventually, she married one of her clients. Now, was that okay? Well, not according to the ethics of the APA, because the APA doesn't really bifurcate between rural and urban. But it was all, I mean, yeah, it was fine. It was fine because she didn't really have much of a choice. And she's still happily married. The desire to help the people in the community that you were raised in is very strong. When you know the client before trying to help them, you are maintaining a dual relationship, and you should try to avoid this if you possibly can. Be aware that if you take on this risk, you are possibly in ethical violation. But also, you need to weigh it between if I don't help, then worse things may potentially happen. Another challenge during your professional relationship is how much information about yourself you should disclose to the client. Self-disclosure should only be used in the best interest of the client, certainly not the practitioner. After the dance is over, after the professional relationship is over, all ethical code strictures are removed. But a practitioner needs to be careful about how much contact they have with an old client to avoid damage due to confusion. The power differential remains. Seeing you out of the professional context may disclose vulnerabilities. It will be difficult to accept this client professionally in the future. Most codes of ethics discuss the following ethical issues related to assessing clients. The assessment procedure or instrument should be within your scope of practice, education, and training. Clients should be fully informed about the procedure and be included in the procedure in a collaborative way. Appropriate instruments or procedures should be selected based on the assessment question. Assessment instruments and procedures used should be standardized and include normative data appropriate for culturally diverse or disabled clients. When administering, scoring, and interpreting instruments, appropriate procedures should be adhered to. Clients should be given a clear and complete explanation of the assessment results. All tests and interview data should be kept secure and released only to individuals who are competent in interpreting the data. Informed consent means full disclosure of purposes, goals, techniques, and procedure rules for assessment and counseling approaches used, in language that is understandable to the client. Legal violations are distinct from ethical violations. Ethical challenges are generally brought before a state licensing board, but can originate from a professional organization. Legal obligations to clients include duty to care, duty to respect privacy, duty to maintain confidentiality, duty to inform, duty to report, and duty to warn. Legal limits to confidentiality. Confidentiality is not absolute. Laws vary by state. It is important to keep up to date in your own state laws concerning confidentiality requirements and expectations. Malpractice is defined as negligence in which a professional fails to follow generally acceptable standards of the profession, resulting in injury to the client. The client must prove four things about the practitioner to recover damages. The practitioner owed the client a duty to conform to a particular standard of conduct. The practitioner had an obligation to follow defined standards of care. The practitioner breached that duty by some act of omission or commission in the professional practice. The client or others suffered measurable damage or injury. The practitioner's conduct was the direct or proximate cause of the damage. The top 5 reasons for malpractice of practitioners in the United States are incorrect treatment, sexual impropriety, breach of confidence, failure to diagnose, incorrect diagnosis, or suicide of the patient. If a practitioner loses in court, there may be several consequences. They might be fined for damages, punitive, for further counseling. They may lose their license. They may lose their reputation. Future difficulties in obtaining malpractice insurance. The court case, whether won or lost, might damage the practitioner financially, emotionally, or professionally. Minimizing the risk of ethical legal challenges, adhere to up-to-date practice methods, good documentation of practices, maintenance of appropriate boundaries with your clients, no multiple relationships, don't see them outside of your counseling sessions. The following activities may lead to malpractice: sexual relationship with a client, practicing beyond your scope of competency, fraudulent billing, violation of reporting laws, breach of confidentiality, or refusal to provide records. Ethical dilemmas involve making a choice between 2 or more relevant but contradictory ethical directives, where every alternative results in some type of undesirable outcome for one or more persons. Damned if you do, no matter which you pick. Reamer in 1995 describes 2 principles that can guide practitioners in resolving ethical dilemmas. Beneficence, where the practitioners should take action intended to help or benefit others. Non-malfeasance, where the practitioner should act without malice in order to do no harm. Elaine Congress, a social worker, came up with the ethic model of decision-making in 2000. Ethic, of course, is an acronym. Ethical decision-making: examine all the relevant client, personal, agency, professional, and societal values, including personal, societal, cultural, agency, client, and professional values. T, think about ethical standards of your professional code of ethics and relevant laws. H, hypothesize about all the possible consequences of different decisions. I, identify all who might benefit and all who might be harmed. It is often necessary to research potential consequences of possible decisions on all those involved. And C, consult with supervisors and colleagues as you begin to formulate choices. When a supervisor, colleague, or consultant is involved, the final decision must take their thoughts into consideration. And that is the end of chapter 3. So I'll talk to you guys next week. Chapter 4 at least, maybe 4 and 5. I'm not sure.